Okay, good morning. Welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, Iyun. Today we started the fifth parak of Maseches Eiruvin, Mishnah Aleph and Beis. I want to talk about Mishnah Beis over here. Mishnah Beis talks about a concept which most people are not familiar with. That obviously we know Eiruvin Tchumen, basically you have a city. In Mishnah Aleph, we learned about the outermost house, protruding house determines where you measure the borders of the city. And then from that point, you measure 2,000 amos, and that's the regular amount of space a person can walk, even without making Eiruvin Tchumen. If you want to make Eiruvin Tchumen, you can walk potentially 4,000 amos away from the city in one direction. Now, Mishnah Beis, it says that in certain instances, we also, besides 2,000 amos, we also, before we start measuring 2,000 amos, we add, from the outermost house, we add 70 and 2/3 amos, called a karfif. It's an encampment or a small yard that you have outside the city boundaries, and then you measure 2,000 amos. So Rameir says you always do that, and Chacham say no, you only do it when you have two cities. That if you would give a karfif to both of them, so then the tchumim, the 2,000 amos, would overlap, and you'd be able to walk from one city to the next city. What's the machlokes Rameir and the Chacham? So this idea of karfif was learned out of Ari Levim. This is where we learn all the halachas of tchumen, basically from Ari Levim. The Ari Levim, the cities that were given to the Levim were not given a portion to each other. They were given certain cities. There were also Ari Miklat. Some of the Ari Levim were used as Ari Miklat, or people who killed unintentionally could run to for refuge. So the Ari Levim, it says in the Torah, they were given 2,000 amos outside the city. V'chutzala, it says v'chutzala, an extra word v'chutzala. So we darshan v'chutzala that they get besides 2,000 amos outside the city boundaries, which they get for, part of it was for an open area, and part of it was 1,000 amos for an open area, a migrash, and 1,000 amos was to feed their animals. So 2,000 amos they got in total. It says v'chutzala also. V'chutzala adds on something else. So he adds on a karfif, which is the amount of a yard, 70 amos and 70 and 2/3 amos, a karfif. We learn it from karfif. Do you say that applies also to Eiruvin Tchumen? So it depends on what the idea of Eiruvin Tchumen is, right? A city, we mentioned that, right? When you're living in a city, you get to walk in that city up till 2,000 amos away from the city boundaries. So what is the idea of the 2,000 amos, right? Is the 2,000 amos considered to be just part of the city? A city is not ending until 2,000 amos away from the city boundaries. Or do we say that the city is a city? Well, the Torah gave you a Tosefes. It gave you something else. It's talking about Tosefes Shabbos, right? You add on Shabbos before, after. So it's not exactly the same thing as Shabbos. If you do Malacha during Tosefes Shabbos, you're not chayav skila. You're not chayav korban chatas. You eat. The Gemara says in Yuma, if you eat after Tosefes Yom Kippur, that's where we learn Tosefes out from. Before Yom Kippur actually starts, before Shkia Sachama or after Sezek Chavim on Motzei Yom Kippur, you're not going to be chayav kares. You might violate a law, but Tosefes Shabbos or Tosefes Yom Kippur or Tosefes Yom Tov is something different than the actual main part of Shabbos or Yom Tov. So here also by the 2,000 amos outside the city, even by Ari Levim, right? Is that considered part of the city, the same exact thing as the city, or is it considered an additional thing that Hashem gave? So I think the way Rameir understands, Rameir says, no, it's considered part of the city. So just like by Ari Levim, that's considered part of the city. So every city, part of the Tchum, includes a karfif, includes 7 amos besides 2,000 amos. And according to the Chacham, that's not the way it works. It's a Tosefes. Even with Ari Levim, we learn it out, b'chutzala, right? So by Ari Levim, there's a sorech, right? It's their city, it's the place they live, right? So they need a little more room. So we give them a karfif, which is basically like a yard outside the city, just to keep extra stuff, to store stuff, or whatever, storage. So that's a necessity over there. The Tosefes, right, includes a karfif. However, by Eiruvin Tchumen, right, it's not such a necessity for people to walk outside the Tchum or to walk to the Tchum, to the end of the Tchum, right? Most people, when they live in a city, they're not going to the borders of the city. They're not going to walk outside the city boundaries. Where are you going? It's an empty area. You're not going to go there. So since it's Tosefes, it's considered like Dechuya. We talk about Hutra and Dechuya. Dechuya means it's, right, it's not really part of the city, but B'shas HaDchak, in a case where we're pressed against the wall, we'll let you use it. So that's what Tosefes is. It has a din of Dechuya, not a din of Hutra or Lo Nemra, exactly part of the city. It's considered like a Dechuya. It's a Dechuya heter over here, Tosefes. So by Ari Levim, it's a necessity for them, so they get that Tosefes. However, in a regular case of a city that's not surrounded by any other cities, there's just wilderness and desert around it, so you don't need to measure that karfif. You don't need v'chutzla is a necessity, right? Because the karfif is also, in addition to the 2,000 amos, the karfif and the 2,000 amos is a necessity over there. It needs storage space. But here, it's just Eiruvin Tchumen is just a halacha about being able to walk to a certain place on Shabbos. It doesn't apply during the rest of the week. They don't need storage space on Shabbos, so it's not applicable. But the Rabbanan say no. If it is relevant. For example, there's another city that's very close to it, and if you would add 72 amos to each city, you'd be able to overlap the Tchumen and be able to walk from one city to another city without making every Tchumen. It's very necessary in that case, and just like Eiruvin, it's necessary. The service is necessary, not just to the amos, but also the karfif. Also, in that case, we would add the karfif to both cities, which is a common say, and that's the concept of these 2,000 amos and the karfif, where they're viewed as a totzefes, in addition, and not actually part of the inherent city itself. Hope you enjoyed today's share. See you in the next one.